Many killers have bizarre fixations and act out twisted fantasies on their victims. The monster featured in this video murdered at least 4 Oregon women in barely over a year, then treated their remains as objects for his sick pleasure. Not only did he kill the 4 women in vicious ways, but he kept some of their body parts and made molds out of others to keep as souvenirs. Jerome Brudos, the shoe fetish slayer. Jerome Brudos was born in Webster, South Dakota on January 31, 1939. He had one older brother, and his mother had wanted a daughter, and due in part to this, she subjected her young son to verbal and physical abuse throughout his childhood. Jerome's fixation on feet and women's shoes began early. When he was only 5 years old, he found a pair of high heels in a junkyard and brought them home. His mother reacted by taking them and burning them. He also reportedly tried to steal his first-grade teacher's shoes and some of his female neighbors' underwear off of their clothesline. His family moved around a lot until eventually winding up in Salem, Oregon. Throughout his childhood, he was in and out of psychiatric hospitals, and when he was still a teenager, his violent assaults began. Brudos began stalking girls in his area, and in some cases he attacked them. He would run up behind them and knock them to the ground, and then in some cases strangle them until they were unconscious, then take their shoes and run. At age 17, he was arrested for kidnapping a girl. He had beaten her and threatened her at knife point to obey his depraved commands. When he was arrested for the assault and sentenced, he was sent to the Oregon State Hospital psych ward. Brudos spent 9 months there and in therapy sessions described how his hatred of women, and his mother specifically, had driven him to attack the girls. He was also determined to be schizophrenic. Brudos graduated high school in 1957 and went on to become an electrical technician. In 1961, at age 22, he married a 17-year-old girl named Darcy Metzler, and the pair had 2 children. He commanded his wife to do housework in the nude wearing only high heels, and his behavior got even stranger. He soon began complaining of terrible headaches that he claimed would cause him to black out. During these blackouts, Brudos would steal shoes and underwear from his neighbors. He would then wear the stolen items when he was alone in his garage, where he would later kill and store his victims. Brudos also set up an intercom system and insisted that his wife let him know before she ever entered the garage. After 7 years of marriage, the sick creature escalated his activities from theft to murder. On January 28, 1968, 19-year-old Linda Slauson came to his home selling encyclopedias. He told her that he did not want to disturb his family, but that he was interested in buying a set of books, and took her into his basement. Once they were alone, he knocked Slauson unconscious with a piece of wood, then strangled her to death. Once she was dead, he dressed her in the stolen underwear and shoes that he had collected, then photographed her in various poses. Brudos also sawed off her left foot, which he kept in his freezer. The rest of her was dumped in the Long Tom River, where he would dump his subsequent victims. On November 28, 1968, Jerome Brudos came across 23-year-old Jan Susan Whitney. Her car had broken down on Interstate 5 near Salem. He picked her up under the pretense of bringing her to a phone to call a tow truck. Instead, he strangled her using a strip of leather and assaulted her body. When he got home, Brudos hung the body in his garage from a pulley that he had installed in the roof. For the next several days, he dressed her up, posed, and photographed her. Even more depraved than these heinous acts, he removed one of her breasts and made a resin mold out of it to use as a paperweight. Once he was done abusing the remains of Whitney, Brudos tied a metal railroad spike to the body and dumped it in the Long Tom River. At this time, he also dumped Linda Slauson's foot, since the foul trophy had begun to rot. Several months later, on March 27, 1969, the monster struck again. He came across 18-year-old Karen Sprinker as she walked to meet her mother for lunch at a local department store. Brudos commanded her at gunpoint to get into his car and took her to his garage of horrors. Once again, he dressed her up in the stolen underwear and shoes that he had collected, but this time, she was alive as he did so. He assaulted and photographed her throughout the ordeal. Eventually, he hanged her from the same pulley that he had used on Jan Whitney. After her death, he continued to assault her and again made a mold of her breasts before stuffing one of his stolen bras with paper towels to fill the void where they had been. Brudos disposed of her by tying her body to a car engine and dumping her into the Long Tom River. The monster failed in his next two attempts to kidnap a victim. On April 21, 1969, less than a month since the murder of Karen Sprinker, Brudos approached 24-year-old Sharon Wood with a toy gun and tried to abduct her from the campus of Portland University where she worked as she walked to a parking garage. He approached her from behind with the plastic pistol and grabbed her, but she fought back ferociously, sensing the evil in Brudos. Wood bit into her attacker's hand and did not let go until she was nearly unconscious from him bashing her head into the ground. The noise spooked Brudos, and he fled the scene as a vehicle approached. When she woke up, Sharon Wood was on her way to the hospital. She had been found by students who called for an ambulance. Once she recovered from the ordeal, she was able to give police a description of her attacker. After the failed attempt at kidnapping Wood, he tried again the very next day. 15-year-old Gloria Jean Smith was walking along the road on April 22nd when Brudos pulled his car alongside of her. He leapt out with the toy gun and tried to force her into the vehicle. Smith fought back and was able to get free of his grasp. Meanwhile, a neighbor saw what happened and shouted out, forcing the creature to drive off. After two failed attempts at kidnapping a victim, Brudos was becoming desperate for his next kill. The day after attacking Smith, he was once again prowling the streets of Portland. He came across 22-year-old Linda Saley as she was shopping for a birthday present for her boyfriend. She was last seen around 5:30 p.m., leaving a jewelry store when Brudos brought her to his garage and murdered her. After the creature finished with Saley, he tied her to a car transmission and dumped her in the river. On May 10th, she was discovered by a fisherman. Investigators began to put the various crimes that occurred in the area together. The disappearances, assaults, and now murder all seemed linked. This was further reinforced when they dredged the river and found the body of Karen Sprinker still tied to an engine block. Upon examination, they found the horrific mutilations done to them at the hands of their killer, as well as the stolen underwear that they were wearing. On May 14th, university students reported that a strange man had been calling the girls' dorms and soliciting dates. One woman who had met him gave a description that was very similar to the one given to them by Sharon Wood. The police told her to arrange for a second date with the stranger, and they prepared to surprise him at the meeting place. When the man came to pick her up, it was revealed that the stranger was none other than Jerome Brudos. They questioned him, and he was let go. Police then visited his house the next day and found the bizarre setup that he had in his garage. Their suspicion grew stronger when they found similar ropes that had been used to anchor the bodies, and the ropes that they had found in his garage also had the same knots on them. They also learned that Jerome's mother had the same kind of car as the one driven by Gloria Smith's attacker, a green VW Carmen Ghia. Brudos attempted to flee with his family but was soon caught and arrested. Gloria Smith confirmed that Brudos was the man who had attacked her. A more thorough search of his home and, more importantly, garage turned up the horrific photographs of 3 of his 4 victims that he had taken during their torture, abuse, and murder. Because Linda Slauson's body had not been found and there were no photos of her, Brudos was only charged with the 3 later murders. Due to the level of evidence in these murders and the forethought that had gone into planning them, Jerome Brudos' lawyers entered a plea of guilty rather than the insanity claim they had planned. The monster also confessed to all 4 murders and gave investigators information leading to the recovery of Jan Whitney. He received 3 life sentences to be served consecutively. His wife also fell under suspicion, as some thought that there was no way that the vicious murders could have occurred right under her nose without her knowledge. However, she was not convicted in any of her husband's crimes. While in prison, Brudos wrote to women's footwear companies to request catalogs and covered the walls of his cell with them. He was Oregon's longest-serving inmate at 37 years behind bars when he died on March 28, 2006 of liver cancer.